Atropos Doctrina is the sixth full-length album from Vanhelgd. This is a Mjolby, Sweden-based death metal band, and one that's been around since the late 2000s. Their style, I've always described their style as something like Autopsy meets a little bit of Dismember, or more squarely, an early Necrophobic. That isn't to say that they are as melodic as the first Necrophobic album, or that they are as a kind of death doom as Mental Funeral, but somewhere in between each of those things. Now, their first tape and their first band was from a different place. It was a little bit more aggressive, like a lot of late 2000s Swedish death metal was. You have to think this was the era that had come from bands like Repugnant, which were a little bit more thrashing. And so this band, they were focused on old school death metal and a very straightforward, a very patient style of it that was classic Swedish death metal. And the first two records reflect that pretty clearly. Later on, they developed their own style, which was still a variation of that interplay, but obviously they become better musicians, and you'll kind of see a progression through their discography, which is entirely natural, especially the first four, where they really grow into their own and begin writing very catchy, doom-infused songs that are pure death metal, but also a little bit melodic, and maybe better known for their ominous guitar lines. If you're a fan of Finnish death metal, you'll appreciate their third and fourth record especially, and perhaps the fifth as well, which was a little bit more in the direction that we find now, which is much more decidedly melodic and refined on this sixth album. So we'll get to a song here, and we'll kind of parse what this record is and why I feel like it is very different from anything else they've done before. The look of this record is very consistent with their past several. The band really hit that turning point with their third album, where their style, their sound, and their visual presentation all became very consistent, and it was really their own thing. And Vanhelgd have been their own thing for a long time, although clearly rooted in Swedish death metal, a little bit of black metal in their sound, of course, and that's where the atmosphere arrives in general. But on this record, you'll notice right away from any clip that you pick up, there's an anthemic melodic black metal quality to a lot of these songs, and it's not necessarily as a flurry of an ice storm or anything like that. This is still the pace that they've always worked in, but melodic death metal really is all over this record in terms of its tone and the polish applied to it. And the production values are especially fine, and they're especially tuned in a way where this brings out this sound, and it feels more accessible, yes, but that maybe depends what era you're coming from and how long you follow this type of music, because it's a very classic sound that is not necessarily what modern melodic death metal is doing in general. What this record does is it hits you with song after song, which are actually very memorable, very catchy, very slickly phrased in terms of the way the guitar melodies form. There's a lot of dual rhythm guitar play on this album. There's a couple of songs that even sound somewhere nearby like a Rotting Christ like hook on the guitar. They've obviously put a lot of work into these songs, and they're very polished, and it's almost unexpected because the autopsy-esque groan of their music is almost completely gone, and now we're getting a melodic blackened death metal record that is uh, much more memorable than almost anything they've done before. And you'll find that the first half and the second half are slightly different, but overall this is a very consistent album from a band who've really chosen a direction and really gone for it on this record. And so for me, it's like I said, it's a remarkably fine work. It's unexpected, and I don't know if the old school death metal purist will exactly love this unless you're attuned to some of those nuances of melodic black metal, of old school melodic death metal, and even some of the newer sounds that they fuse into this record, which are slightly blackened and maybe not so rooted in pure heavy metal in the same way that some of their other choices have been in the past. So it's a very atmospheric record, a melodic metal record in some sense, where it centers around melody most of the time. But none of it is sweet, none of it is cloying, all of it is very much in service of morbid death metal. And for me, it's a huge change for the band that I've been a fan of since just about the beginning. But I still like this change. I think it's very strong. I think it's a very memorable record. I think the presentation is very fine. I particularly like the themes, and it draws upon the last one just a little bit. And the artwork is exceptional. Of course, Mattias Frisk has always been a very integral part of their aesthetic, as well as being in the band, and you can see the band improve in leagues along with his visual imagery. There's a parity there that I think is very strong. So as a big fan, I was a big fan of this record. That should be no great surprise, but I would say that it is different, and I would give it time to show you what it can do, in case you just don't like the level of melody and glossier presentation that you find here. So check it out if you will. It released on July 12th, and read my review if you'd like more of my thoughts. The